All right. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Special Council meeting Wednesday, May 29th at 6 p.m. It's now time for me to call our meeting to order. I'm going to start with a moment of silent reflection. Please join me in a moment of silence. Thank you. Moving on to our land acknowledgement, the municipality of Port Hope exists on the lands of the Mississauga Anishinaabe traditional territory covered by the Williams Treaties. We honor and recognize First Peoples as rights holders and stewards of the lands and waters on which we have the privilege to live, work, and play, including the Ganaraska Forest and River. We pay respects to elders past, present, and emerging. We commit to actions towards truth and reconciliation by recognizing the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, strengthening ties with First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples, especially those who make their home in Port Hope, and learning from Indigenous ways of knowing and being. We do so by recognizing the past and working towards a shared future. Moving on to item number 2, are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest? I note that none were received prior to tonight's meeting. Seeing none. Moving on to item number 3, items for consideration. The purpose of this special meeting is for council members to receive a staff report regarding proposed changes to the taxi licensing and regulating bylaw as noted on today's agenda. So we turn over to report 3.1 at item number 3.1, report CS 1024. I'm hearing myself double. Okay. So again, we're considering item 3.1, report CS 1024, taxi licensing changes. Could I ask the director to introduce this report?
Thank you, Mayor Hankivsky. I've heard from a number of councillors about the report, the short report that's presented here tonight. I'll let the report speak for itself, but in terms of an introduction, I'll cover off some of the 5 W's. So we have, as you know, 2 taxi operators in Port Hope, both of which provide a quality service to our residents. They know the realities of our market better than anyone, better than me, better than the clerk, and I would argue better than council. Comply with our bylaw, and we have a good working relationship with both of those companies. We also have to recognize that we have potential new operators as well. Some of these are the rideshare companies that everyone's familiar with, but there could be other potential operators we just don't know. Per our current bylaw, these other rideshare options are prohibited. They'd have to get taxi licenses, and these companies don't operate as taxis. The industry has changed significantly since the bylaw was first passed in 2013. We've regulated taxis since at least 1963. The taxi bylaw as it stands today has been updated as recently as 2019, but is obviously antiquated. Even more so, the approach we use to licensing taxis is out of date and doesn't reflect that market. This has triggered a need to really review whether we want to be in the business of licensing at all. Because if we want to continue licensing, we're left in a position where we have to enforce that bylaw. Our operators provide services in Port Hope and Cobourg. It's a shared market, and it's well understood to be one. Council has provided formal direction last year to have staff prepare a change that respects our taxi industry, but also moves us into a position where we can provide more options, including rideshare. If you're wondering why now, it's because our bylaw is even less relevant than it was before Cobourg has just passed their updated rideshare vehicle for hire bylaw. Cobourg recently passed that bylaw after a couple years of review. In our current bylaw, Cobourg calibrates our fares, and those fares are common or were common across both municipalities. The fares for Cobourg cabs are now left to the cab companies to determine, while in Port Hope, they're still prescribed by council. They've only changed once in about 11 years. Having one licensing scheme in Cobourg and a different one here in Port Hope is redundant and not supportive of the industry or future growth. So why don't we just adopt the Coburg bylaw? As staff, we don't believe we have the ability currently to enforce it. We're not in a position to have Coburg enforce it on our behalf. Sorry, I'm getting a phone call. But mostly, given that we don't have concerns with the current industry and we need to help create a market, we don't believe passing that bylaw is the best way to improve our options for our residents and our businesses. So we're either going to work towards greater regulation, which will take additional time and resources, or as staff prefer, we try deregulating. So give us time to see the impacts firsthand and time to seek comment throughout the 2-year period we're proposing. We seek comment from operators, from new businesses, from the police, from our residents. This formalized feedback opportunity would be used to measure success, and we'll determine the metrics to do so through that period. We're probably thinking about complaints, having a market review about new operators, and of course, taking into account any comment we receive back from our current licensed operators. We're here tonight at the call of the mayor to address an issue that has received formal council direction, which has been well publicized, and we've heard from the community on this topic. So how do we do this? Well, there's no vote that council can take that would have new rideshare options here tomorrow or new transportation options here tomorrow. Only the market will determine when those services arrive. But by passing the bylaw tonight and providing the direction as we recommend, I think we're taking a progressive step towards creating the best case scenario for that to happen, while also respecting our current operators and giving them more flexibility to operate as they see fit to the benefit of our residents and businesses alike. So I look forward to hearing council's deliberation. And of course, as always, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much for the highlights on the very excellent and thorough report. I'm wondering if my colleagues have any questions or comments. Councillor Adam.
Thank you. So I was saying to some people throughout the last little while, I don't have a lot of lived experience with any of this stuff. I've never taken an Uber or a Lyft or anything like that in my entire life, and maybe 5 to 10 taxis in my life. I don't have a lot, so I wanted to read your report and get a lot of that info from you. I got to tell you, Brian, it's one of the best reports, staff reports that I think I've ever read, and I fully support your recommendations. So thank you.
We'll go in the order. Councillor Mink.
Thank you. So I have a few notes here because I have had several conversations with the public as well as the staff. So first, I want to thank Brian for the report as well as staff for working on this and trying to coordinate with Coburg. And I know that has been part of the delay of this. I'm also happy to hear, to my understanding, that the taxi companies were consulted and are supportive of this structure. And I think it's great that this does allow, to my understanding, an opportunity for them to expand in ways that they need to expand to continue their business, as well as to help maintain services to those people who rely on that. So that's great news. And I do agree that Port Hope does not have the capacity to regulate in the way that Coburg is, and that there are a component of the public who want, I'm going to say rideshare, but this is what brings me to where I'm torn, because it's to me, there's two topics here. There's deregulating the taxi bylaw, which is one thing, and then there's a belief that we're going to have rideshare here tomorrow, and we're going to have an abundance of people waiting to take us cheaply across town wherever we want to go at any hour of the day. And that is my fear, is the misunderstanding that market, that business case for this has not come to us. We see people present business cases to us all the time to tell us why something is viable here. We've had the cannabis shops, we've had, the dome for the tennis, we've had pump tracks, we've had all sorts of things come here to say this is viable in this community. And we've never had rideshare come here to say that this is a viable market for this product. So that's my fear, is the educational piece. And I think we need to sort of get ahead of that and create that education and understanding that we're not going to have this tomorrow. it's different than deregulating. Those are two different topics, sort of. So that's my concerns at this time.
If I could respond, I don't disagree. There is a common belief that Port Hope is doing something that's not supporting or not sort of, or keeping rideshare at bay. The reality is, while our bylaw does conflict with rideshare opportunities, rideshare is not here because the market's not yet here. But by deregulating, that sort of cleans the slate and creates that opportunity for that market to arrive. And that's, in my position, the best move council can make at this time.
Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. I agree. Just echo. I appreciate the thoroughness of the report, and I also think the recommendations that are coming forward aren't exactly what I expected to see. But I really appreciate the thinking and creating space for all sorts of different solutions to operate within our community, because I think that's the main thrust here, right? We need more transportation options in our community, and this means that we are not in the way of that happening. I also do think that there's been, we are seeing a bit of a shifting demographic here. And I think some of the newer members of our community, those that are moving here from the GTA, are used to having more sort of on-demand rideshare and taxi options that are reliable. And I think we might not be there at this moment, but we might be getting very close to there in terms of this being a viable market. And I think there are lots of families that I'm aware of, those that I speak to, who are constantly on the fence of, do we need a second vehicle? More options in terms of rideshare and taxis mean it becomes more viable to operate only one car. And in the affordability climate that we're in right now, I think that could be a real support for family budgets. And of course, the environmental benefits too of not always defaulting to riding one's own car. So I think it's going to be really appreciated, and it'll be interesting to see what happens. The question I did have is, in your jurisdictional scan and what you've looked at in other communities, when the opportunity for rideshare to move into a market is created, do you have a sense of how long it has taken in other municipalities for those kinds of systems to develop and those companies to open up shop, I guess, in those areas?
That's a very good question. I can think of the case of the Muskokas. So Bracebridge and Gravenhurst have both deregulated and now have an active rideshare application in those communities. To what sort of extent those services are offered, I don't know. I do believe those opportunities sort of took place around the same time period. I can't speak exactly to sort of how long it took for those to arrive. I also can't speak to what level of preparation had already happened by the time they decided to deregulate. But it's the best I can do in terms of answering that.
Thank you. Councillor Lass, and then I'll go Councillor Todd back around.
Couple things. In the 90s, when McDonald's started pizza, we thought, a slam dunk, we're going to do delivery. Well, it failed, and because people weren't ready for that, and now we have DoorDash and Skip the Dishes, and so that's called progress. So things have progressed to that level. And as for Lyft or Uber or whatever, I've had a lot of experience with it in Toronto, and it was fabulous. And I kind of think that the people that are helping drive this solution or this thought are the bar owners and restaurants and people like that, then they may sponsor their own Lyft vehicle or vehicles, or hire students on the weekends to shuffle people. So I see a lot of good, and I notice that we have representatives from police in here, and I'm sure that they would welcome the fact to get a bunch of people that have been at the bars off the road and into cabs or Lyft vehicles. So I see nothing but positive.
Thank you, Councillor Lass. Councillor Todd.
Thank you. I thought the report was great. I'm really glad to see it. So thanks, Brian. I think it was a really thorough report as well. And I think it really speaks to where we're at, like from a modernization, we need to get to this space. The reality is people already have car for hire, right? Like if you need a lift out to the airport, folks are taking money and they'll drive them out there. So I think what this does is really just sort of put us into the modern times. I also agree that, I don't think we're going to see a barrage of Lyft and Uber. I don't think they've been waiting for this report before they show up. The market will dictate what the market dictates. I would imagine in the short term, the taxis will continue operating exactly as they are. The market will find its way and it'll do its thing. I was really happy to hear in your opening comments about metrics. I love a good metric. So as we figure out what those metrics are and use them as either reasons for supporting this 2 years from now, or reasons why we would not keep it and revert it. I think it's important to have those clearly identified so that we can say, yes, this is what success looks like. But I think this is going to open up a world of opportunity, not only for people who want to make a little extra money in the evenings and take people home from the bars, but quite frankly, for people who need on-demand rides. I think we're in the right spot. So thanks for all that. Looking forward to it.
Thank you. And I'll just add my thoughts and comments too, and just a little bit more perhaps of the background, because it's not the first time that this has come to the table for discussion. And if you do recall that I did mention that this had come up during the campaign, but actually mostly in one of the first youth delegation meetings where they had asked me for this kind of transportation option in the community. So I really want to acknowledge the youth voices that were involved in bringing this idea to the table. And this is just a shout out to the youth of our community to say, yes, your ideas can shape Port Hope, and you do have a voice in this community, and we can advocate on your behalf. But really beyond that, it's not just the youth that have asked for this. We have, as evidenced by the by the way, the youth did send in 53 letters of support for this initiative, which is significant. And we do have letters from the Chamber, from the Port Hope Police Services, from Loyalist College, from business owners. I think these are all indications that the community is ready. And although I don't expect companies like Uber and Lyft to be knocking down our doors, I can tell you that I had extensive conversations early in this process with Y-Drive out of Peterborough, who do specialize coming into local communities, expressing a real interest in expanding through to Port Hope. So whilst there might not be a market for some of the larger players, I'm fairly confident that we'll see smaller operators come and join the community. And it does, as everybody has talked about, open up a whole range of flexible transportation options. It's great for youth. It's great for seniors wanting to age in place, especially if they're in areas where transportation is not realistic. It leaves them an opportunity to keep their independence and their autonomy. They can hopefully get rides when they need it. And I do think it's great for the environment, as the deputy mayor's talked about. But I also want to pause on the support from the police. We talked about it again at our last police services meeting, because DUI charges are on the rise. They're actually on the increase in our community. And it would be wonderful to have more options for people to think about their decisions before they go out to restaurants, before they go out to bars, and not have to make those decisions that put their lives at stake and those of others in our community as well. So did you want to add something else, Jackie? Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to pick up, Councillor Todd alluded to the ride share that already takes place in the community. And I had meant to mention that as well, because it was communicated to me as like a rite of passage. After I'd been in this community for about 5 years, someone passed on the name and number of the guy they call when they need a ride, and I now have one. But it just seemed like, there is a lot of that happening in this community. A lot of people in the community have that unofficial, the guy who just does it on the side, which works fine for a lot of us in some situations. But I'm not putting my child or my adolescent child in a car with someone I don't really know when there's no, company or regulation, behind it. And it also means that, if it becomes official, it becomes equitable and accessible to everyone in the community, and not just something that's working for those that happen to be in the know. So I think that I just wanted to add to that a little.
I'm not sure who had their hand up first, but Councillor Mencken and Councillor Lass.
I just wanted to ask a question related to what the Deputy Mayor just said about putting your child in a car with somebody you don't know. Would this not open that opportunity up that anybody could offer a ride at any point, though? Is that not true? We won't be regulating that, is that correct?
We won't be regulating, so we'll be opening up an opportunity for the market to do its thing. Most rideshare companies aren't regulated in terms of criminal checks and whatnot at the municipal level. The municipality requires that company to conduct their own. So at a taxi level, we do require criminal checks, but typically that's handed over to the provider, who's going to provide services based on their reputation and have policies in place, as we would just about any other class of business in Port Hope.
So just a follow-up, though, that provider could be independent. It could just be a single person who just hands out cards, though, that doesn't have, correct?
From the municipality's perspective, if we're out of the regulation, yes, but that would be subject to the same consumer protection laws and traffic safety laws as are prescribed by the province.
Just one more comment. I agree with all the comments here that there is a demand from a certain group of people in the community to have rides available. For myself, very closely related to someone who drove Uber in London, Ontario, and told me that market is not a sustainable market, London, Ontario. The city is too small to make an income as an Uber driver. I think that we are looking at it from one point of view. We also need to look at it from the other and write yourself a business model as if you're going to go into business. How many rides would you need? How far would you have to go to make an income? And what type of lifestyle would you have to make yourself available at any hour to make that income? And is it worth it to basically be available at all hours to try to make minimum wage? So that's something that I think if we're looking at this objectively, we need to think critically too. We can't, I hear you that this is a great idea. There's people who want it, but flip it around and look at it from that operator's point of view. And will they continue to make a career to this? How sustainable is that long term? One thing to offer rides to your friends and family and neighbors, but another to try to compete in a market as small as Port Hope. And another thing that we need to consider is that there is no obligation for them to pick up. They can easily just turn and say, I'm not picking that up. So there is the scenario, and I'm not trying to be a pessimist or throw a roadblock here, but there is that scenario where we could have people stranded because I think the rural community, a lot of those names we got on that youth list were from Gorsland and Garden Hill, whatever, get a ride into town and there's no availability to get them back. So I think we need to think critically as well. I'm not saying don't vote for this. I'm just saying that I'm hearing a lot of great, why this is wonderful, but I'm not hearing very much constructive thought about why it could be problematic too in a small community like this.
Councillor Lass, and then I want to respond to some of the critical thinking.
Yeah, well, the original point I was going to make is that Operation Red Nose garners about $30,000 in a 6-week period, offering a rideshare type program. And I know it's the busiest time of year for that type of thing. So from that point of view, there is some sort of demand. But I liken, and you're right, this is not a career that you're talking about for somebody to set up on their own, because it's much like working in a fast food restaurant. It was always designed that it was for startup employees, people that just wanted to fill in. It was never meant to be a McJob. Somebody else coined that term and thought that all of a sudden fast food places should be the be all and end all for people for careers. And well, it was never designed on that premise, and neither is this. So it's in this case, it's not the buyer beware, let the seller, who is going to be the driver, beware of the pratfalls.
And, I think that some of the things that you're raising, Councillor Mink, would extend to any kind of rideshare in any community and anywhere across Canada. And it's really not, the market is going to determine how the market is proceeding, and it's really not our place to be determining how businesses should or should not run, frankly. And I think that's the reason why there are different ride share companies, some that choose to offer services in more urban centers, and they see that that's where the market is, and then there's others that actually choose to invest in smaller communities and are very realistic about that. But some of the things that you're talking about happen with taxi companies too, where they're not operating on a day or they don't show up. So, but I don't really think it's our role to be determining who may or may not want to take this up, or how companies should run, or who may or may not be interested in coming into our community. Director.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to that if I could, and I think it's perfectly reasonable, and it's exactly what council should be doing, is looking at this issue from all angles. But just with respect to where we are today and where we've been as a municipality, we've never been in a position, and we don't have the authority to prescribe to a company how they operate. We simply license the taxi and have a certain number of things identified in the report that we can control. We can't prescribe to a company that they must provide service to anyone or must respond to calls at any time of day. And we've heard from the operators we've consulted with on what's being proposed tonight, that this would allow them, as they're currently providing their quality service, to be in a more flexible position to provide better service. It's going to be their responsibility to make sure their insurance coverage is adequate, make sure their policies cover them off the way they need them to. But the municipality would simply be out. Currently, we license by cab. The two companies we have 2 cabs each. We've heard from one of those operators about a situation where you have a minor collision, your car is out in the shop for 2 weeks, you're down to 50% in terms of operating your company because you're licensed by that car. Deregulation allows them to flex their coverage, flex their service, and hopefully it improves things for our residents.
Okay, I think we've had a good discussion around the table. So the recommended action is listed on the agenda, and is as follows. That do I need to read it out? Would you prefer that I read it out this evening? Okay. The recommended action, point 1, is that Bylaw 37, 2024, Attachment A, authorizing the repeal of taxi cab and limousine licensing, Bylaw 29, 2013, as amended, be passed effective June 1st, 2024, and that Council authorize the elimination of all vehicle for hire regulations to lessen the financial and administrative burdens to current taxi operators and improve equity within the local taxi and emerging rideshare industry, while eliminating all municipal barriers to the introduction of additional vehicle for hire providers, and that staff be directed to conduct an opportunity for feedback on the industry deregulation and to report back to Council within a 2-year period regarding the need for adjustment or reintroduction of industry regulations, and that the current taxi cab licensees be refunded their 2024 license application fees, and that the fees and charges by law be amended accordingly at the time of the next annual update and consolidation to reflect these changes. Can I get a mover and seconder for this? Moved by Councillor Less, seconded by Councillor Adam. All in favor? And that is passed. Thank you. Moving on to item number 4, the confirmatory bylaw. It is now time for the confirmatory bylaw. This bylaw confirms the proceedings that took place this evening and provides for formal adoption through a bylaw. Can I get a mover and seconder? Moved by Councillor Todd, seconded by the Deputy Mayor. All in favor? And that is passed unanimously. This concludes our business to be covered on today's agenda. We've reached the end of the agenda, and I'm in a position to adjourn the meeting at 6:30 p.m. Thank you very much for everybody in attendance.